Hey, welcome
Good
everyone
morning.
to Icon. How's everybody doing? Y'all doing good? Cal, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yes, I feel like a new woman.
Yeah.
I feel so much.
Refreshed
Oh, and so
and-
well, it's just so much better. Like, when you've been sick for a long time
Yeah.
and then you finally feel better, you're like, oh,
This is what not being sick
this
feels
is what
like.
it feels like to be a normal human being.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you guys, we're going to look in the chat. Again, we're a little bit closer to live here, so what we're saying, we should see you guys there. But I'm curious, did anybody go see some fireworks? Anybody go out and about? We were just in the lobby chatting with people and heard where people went to go watch fireworks, rather. We went over kind of by H-E-B and just kind of stayed in our car and opened the back up. And it was good. Kyle Fireworks. Yeah, it was a good time. Good time. Until we tried to go home, and apparently the city thought they'd shut off every side road except for the
Like,
interstate.
every exit in the parking lot, like where Target and like Chick-fil-A and McDonald's are, like every single exit to the access road was shut down.
So we did a
it was
lap.
fun.
But yeah.
Here's to you, City of Kyle.
That's right. But anyway, Kel, do you want to talk about how people can get connected if they want more information?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just dribbled coffee down my chin. So
Nice. Classy.
I have it super together today.
That's right.
Yeah, if you are new around here, which is, since we've been online, we've had some new people joining us. And if you haven't had a chance to connect yet, go ahead and click on that connect button. It'll just take you to a page where you can fill out some information so that we have a way to be able to stay in touch with you through email. Just to be able to keep you up to date and keep you posted on things as they change and as things, right now everything feels like it's changing from week to week. So,
Yeah.
Or you can download the Icon app. That's really easy. Set it up to receive notifications, and you will be notified for anything that you might need to know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And then there's the info for downloading the app if you're interested in doing that. Also, one thing that you can do while you're here in service is you can request prayer. So if you click that little button, what it'll do is it'll open up a private chat with some people on the team that are part of either the prayer team or staff or our boards. And they just like to know how they can pray with you. So you'll have kind of a public chat. If you're watching on mobile, you might need to look for a different tab kind of opening up there for that chat. There's people that would love to pray with you this morning. Also, one thing we want to let you know about is opportunities to give, to continue to support the work and ministry of Icon Church. We just want to say, first and foremost, thank you so much for your continued generosity in this season and in general. We know that this online thing is so different. It's different for a lot of us. So those of you that are continuing to support the work we do, thank you so much. That allows us to kind of continue to do what we do. And we talk about this often at Icon, but we believe three things about money. One, Jesus taught us that what's ours isn't meant just for us. Yeah. So we're to be good stewards of what we have, whether it's little or whether it's much, so that we can leverage that and be a blessing to others. And one way that people do that is by supporting Icon. So whether you give via the app or clicking that button or online, we just want to say thank you so much for that generosity. And here's what we're going to do today. We do have some more kind of announcements that we want to hit on. Kelly, do we want to hit on any of those now, or
We do at the end. It's
we'll hit those. This is an executive decision I'm making. We're gonna hit those other announcements at the end. But we actually are in for a treat today. I was talking to Don Hamilton these past few weeks, and just kind of catching up with him. And if you guys don't know Don has come in and led worship for Icon a few times, and a good friend of ours. And he and his wife Linnell are up in the Kansas City area, and they're in the process of planting a church. And man, I was talking to him, I can't imagine like planning to plant a church, during a global pandemic.
No.
It's so hard. I mean, think about how challenging it was to kind of like keep like cohesiveness in the launch team and like build excitement. And you can't even hardly get together.
That'd be hard.
But yeah, so anyway, I asked him if he would come and lead worship for us. So he picked a couple of songs, and they might be songs that you're not familiar with. And if they're not, I just want to encourage you to lean in and allow this to be a time that you can kind of prepare your heart and get ready for the day. So we're going to go ahead and jump into worship with Don, and we're continuing with this trend. So we did this last week to see how it went, and several of you enjoyed it. So today's message, we're just going to kind of do live between Kelly and I. So
we'll see how it goes.
We'll see. Nothing like a new experiment. So we're going to go ahead and give this a shot. We are in week 2 of our series, Bless This Mess, talking about relationships. So we'll get to that in a minute. But before that, we're going to go ahead and go live with worship with Don. So stick around and we'll be back for the message.
Icon, what's up, guys? Man, let me say this. I miss you guys so much. Me and my wife talk about you guys all the time. So for you who may not know me, my name is Don, and I'm great friends with your pastors, Dan and Kelly Matlock. I mean, we have been cool for, I don't know, some years now. But I just want you guys to know that I miss you. I'm praying for you down there in Kyle, Texas. If there was a way for you to email me or mail me some summer moon, I would like some moon milk, because that is the greatest thing in the world, and I don't have any out here in Kansas. But listen, I was talking to your pastor last week, and he asked me if I could just send you guys some worship for this week as you're still going through your quarantine worship and all that stuff. So I shot a video for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy. I will be there soon. I really hope so. Dan and Kelly, bring me down. We miss you guys. Love you guys so much, Icon. Bye.
I've seen your goodness on the mount. I felt your love down in the valley, and your grace, it still surrounds me. Lord, you've been good to me. You've been good to me. My soul sings with all my heart. I love you, Lord. You're my first love. You're my reward. And through the years, you've been good to me. So good to me. So good to me. You have been so good. I have breath within my body. I have life inside my bones. And I cannot help but praise you. Lord, you've been good to me. Lord, you've been good to me. And my soul sings. My soul sings with all my heart. You're my reward. And through the years, you've been good to me. So good to me. So good to me. Oh, so I'm dancing on the rising sun with the hope for future and the dream to come. And when seasons change, no, I won't give up. You never failed me, no, not one. Now I'm dancing on the rising sun with the hope for future and the dream to come. And when seasons change, no, I won't give up. You never fail me, no, not once. Now I'm dancing on, now I'm dancing on the rising sun with the hopeful future and a dream to come. Yeah, when seasons change, I won't give up. No, you never failed me. No, not once. My soul sings. My soul sings. My soul sings with everything that I have. My soul sings with all that I am. My soul sings with all my heart. I love you, Lord. You're my first love. You're my reward. And through the years, you've been good to me. So good to me. So good to me. You have been good, God. So good to me. Oh, you have been so good. Your goodness and I will sing of the goodness of God. And I love you, Lord, for your mercy never failed me. And all my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. When my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. One more time we say, your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. To your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness. And all I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy pray that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Well, welcome back. I love Don.
Oh, I know.
Love him.
Yeah, it was so great seeing him.
It
And
is.
yesterday in Coffee with Icon, Linnell popped in for a second. It was good to
she
see
did.
her.
I wasn't on when she popped in.
Yeah.
So thank you, Don, for leading us in
Yes, thank
worship.
you.
So yeah, we're gonna just continue like we did last week with just talking live and just kind of having a conversation. And we would really love for you to engage in the chat, and we'll ask some questions, and we would love for you to throw out some responses and some thoughts. I love the way that like I felt really good last week doing that, because it feels a little bit more like we're together, and it just feels like a better way to connect, you know? So I love that.
Yep. So we'll be kind of reading these live, might throw some of your things, even though all of you see this, we'll try to kind of keep an eye on this, and we may reiterate some things if we see it
Just don't
pop
say
up.
anything inappropriate, because
That's
we'll
right.
say it
So,
live.
so Adam, we're talking to you specifically. So we have a whole separate chat thread just for Adam to protect the rest of you from that. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
But we're in a series called Bless This Mess, which even, I know, doing a series, it's just, it just is what it is.
But I think it gives us kind of some direction, and
does.
it makes
No,
things a little
it's
bit
good.
easier for us at
It's
least.
good.
Yeah.
And last week we're talking about relationships, so just relationships across the board. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on like marriage and kind of romantic relationships, which I sometimes struggle with this, only because I know for most of my life in church, the church can tend to sort of elevate marriage as this end all be all for a Christian life, and it totally negates and excludes people that are single and people that are choosing to be single, you know, people that have no desire to get married, or people that are just kind of would like to get married someday but just haven't yet. And so I just want to say off the top, like, I don't want to do that with this. You know, I think it's important that we talk about it, because there are so many people that are married or want to be married, and so it's an important topic. But I also want you to know that if you are single, you are no less valuable to the kingdom. You like aren't missing out on anything the Spirit has to offer because you're not married or dating someone or whatever. Like, you have just as much access to the Holy Spirit as anybody who's married. Like, so, I mean, are there elements that we can learn in marriage that point us more to who God is? Well, sure, but you're not excluded from that if you're not married. So I just wanted to say that right off the top to make sure that all of you fabulous single people know that, like, you aren't, marriage is not like the end all be all of the Christian life. It's just an aspect of it. So
yeah, man, church can be so weird sometimes, you know, and
so weird. Can we just say that and just get that out there, that Christians and church can be very weird.
Yes.
Like, And I am a Christian. I'm a pastor, so, you know, but it's true.
Yeah, I was just joking with someone recently how pastors will often, how it's so weird, they elevate marriage over everything else. And then oftentimes, and I'm going to, as a guy, most of the time it's a male pastor that does this, but how much like pastors like will be like, there's my wife in the front row, isn't she hot, everybody? Man, my wife's so hot, man.
I think we early on did that a few times.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think that it's like, that's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you do when you get up to preach. You're supposed to acknowledge your hot spouse sitting on the front row.
But can we be honest with how weird that is?
So weird.
Like, at what work function do you see your like boss introduce you and be like, this is my wife, isn't she hot? And you're like, ugh.
What are you supposed to say to that?
Sure.
You know,
I mean,
yeah, she's
it just,
hot.
oh gosh, there's so many weird things. So we apologize if you grew up in the church and any of that weirdness.
So don't go back and listen to Icon's earliest
No,
messages
just-
because I'm sure we both did that because we were like,
absolutely.
oh, this is like what you're supposed
Yep.
to do to be funny. And
I mean,
but
don't get me wrong.
It is so
I'm
cringy.
attracted to you, but I don't think it's
Well, that's good. I'm glad
yeah,
for that.
yeah. So Amanda agrees.
Yeah, she said so cringy.
It is. But yeah, and I do think this does. This conversation does intersect a lot of people, but also knowing it doesn't intersect everyone, you know. And
Yeah.
I saw in the chat some people that were like, "Yes, absolutely, this happens so much in the church." So again, we don't want to at all communicate, you know, hey, if you're not married or not in a relationship, you can
Yeah.
check out for the next. We want to
Right.
hear your input as well.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, you like someone being single does not mean that they don't like understand what it takes to have a good, healthy, committed relationship.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. So here's what I wanted to do. I've like jotted down a few questions and a couple things to talk about, but I just thought maybe for starters, and Dan, I'd love to hear what you have to think about this, but I know for me, before, and we've been married for, hold on, almost 18 years, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
I was gonna let you go first, because I would have been doing the math too. Yeah.
So at this point, I've almost been with you longer than I haven't been with you. Like,
Yeah.
pretty, you know,
Yeah.
it's another 6-7 years. So clearly there are a lot of people that have been married a whole lot longer than we have and that know a whole lot more than we do. But I do think in 18 years of marriage, there are some things that we've learned that have been helpful to what it takes for a committed relationship to make it, you know, for the long haul. And things we're still learning and putting into practice. I feel like, honestly, I've learned more recently, I feel like I've been learning so many helpful things that I keep looking back thinking, man, if I would have known this or implemented this 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
you know, how helpful that would have been. But I know that before we got married, I think there were a lot of things that I believed about marriage and a lot of things that I thought about marriage that once we got married, I realized,
Yeah.
things are a little bit different. So, I know because we all come from different families ourselves. So a lot of us, well, really all of us, as we're walking into a relationship, we are bringing everything with us that we've been taught about what a healthy relationship
Yeah.
is supposed to be, or lack thereof. I mean, some of us come from families where we never had an example of what a healthy, committed marriage relationship looked like. And so for you, what do you think are some things that maybe you believed about marriage that either kind of once you got married, you were like, oh, it's really different, or maybe some things that you used to think that have shifted and changed and evolved over the years about marriage?
Yeah, I think for me, kind of two things stand out to me. One, growing up in the home that I grew up in, my parents, literally, I can't remember a single argument I ever saw that they got in. Like disagreements, sure, but never saw them argue. And I think to a degree, there was some unhealth in that. But as a kid, I just thought, oh, this is what a good relationship looks like. So when I got married, I thought, well, if I'm doing it right, like we'll never get into an argument. And both of us can be a little strong-willed, especially when it comes to one another. And so early on, we would get in these arguments, and I'm like, what's wrong with us? Like, why something feels broken? Because again, I had no context for that growing up, you know. So I had an expectation of like, we'll just never argue, you know. We'll always agree, and it'd be helpful if it was my opinion.
I was just gonna say what you mean by that is that I will always cave and,
absolutely that's
and agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a sign that a friend of ours had up in their kitchen that said, I would agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. And that's like,
It's like Dan's motto.
yeah, like, listen, we can agree, but then what's the point of that? So yeah, that for sure, I think was one of the expectations that I took into it, that I think also differed from your experience as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I grew up in a family where there were some unhealthy relationships that were sort of the examples that I had, and to me, I was just like, yeah, I mean, couples fight. Like, that was just, that wasn't out of the ordinary for me. But also, I tend, I'm a very non-confrontational person, so I kind of do whatever I can to keep the peace and to not have that argument. But for some reason with you...
You have no problem with that.
I have no
problem with confrontation when it
suddenly
comes
become very confrontational when it
Yes.
comes to our relationship.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think another thing that I, from kind of the church world, had, at least in my head, was like, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about this later, but the idea that, like, more so, like, I, as the husband, somehow had to, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, but, like, I had to somehow know the future so that I can lead us towards that. I had to somehow have this connection with God, that I'm this, spiritual covering. And I think the Bible does talk about that, but again, I think you're going to bring up some helpful ways in how it talks about that. But it was always presented in this way that as the husband, I was here, and then my wife was subservient underneath me. And I think that was unhealthy for you, but it was also unhealthy for me, because I think it put an expectation that I couldn't meet. And then it was like, well, gosh, do I, need to do this or need to do that? It was all these expectations of I'm not enough if I'm not doing this, or I'm not leading my household if I don't do X, Y, or Z. And instead of it being, we're in a relationship together and we're growing to know each other more and to be more like Jesus, it was like this pressure of like, and I gotta know the future, and I gotta, and not literally, but to be able to lead us in that direction. I think that was the other thing that I kind of had in my mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I grew up in the whole world of, and people in the church really love to talk about how wives need to submit to their husbands. That's like a topic that a lot of people in church really like to focus on and talk about and use to oppress women and use that sort of, weaponize that against women. And I think for me, when we first got married, and not even to mention, just to be clear, like, obviously we are in a heterosexual relationship, husband and wife, but like, not to mention the ways in which that whole concept completely excludes
the LGBTQ community.
When it's like, well, if it's a gay marriage between two men, it's like, well, then if one person is supposed to be the head and the other person is supposed to submit, then what does that look like for them, And so, but I think for me, I really did have that mentality of I'm supposed to submit to my husband. And that even went to the extent of thinking, and this was said to me and taught to me, so it's not just something I came up with in my own brain, but like, where your husband goes, you go. Like, what your husband feels called to, that's now what you are called to. So from the very beginning, I was taught that when we got married, suddenly my life no longer belonged to me. My body no longer belonged to me. It was like, you need to have sex with your husband whenever he wants you to, because if you don't, then it's sin for you to deny your husband, and you could push him towards having an affair, or push him towards seeking that elsewhere. I mean, these are all things that were drilled into me for years and years and years. And so I went into marriage thinking, I no longer belong to myself.
Well, and it strips you of so much of your identity. You know what I mean? Like, this stuff that is in you that's good, it's like, no, you're called to whatever he's called to. And no, you have to, and it robs you of so much that God did put in you, and strips 100%. You of so much of that identity.
And I I can remember when we were engaged, there was a friend / acquaintance of ours who had gotten a job at, I'm not going to name the church, but at a very large church in Texas. And he
Yes.
he came to us a few months before we were going to get married with this like amazing idea of this job opportunity for us to come and be on staff at this large mega church in Texas. I'm a Midwest girl, grew up in the Midwest my whole life, so I lived in Indiana and then Illinois, and that was it. We were about to get married, and he comes to us with this like grandiose idea of this. He wants to offer us this job, and
Well, even that, when you think back about it, he didn't offer it to us. You know what I mean? Like,
no, he wasn't even his place to be offering us this job. It was
and more than that, like he took me out to dinner and not you.
Oh, yeah. Well,
You weren't even included.
No, I wasn't
in
it
the
was
conversation.
a job for Dan, and then I was going to be the devoted pastor's wife to follow and look hot on the front row.
That's right.
That was, like, my
Yes, that would be
job.
your role.
But I remember so then you guys went out and talked about it, and then you guys came back from that dinner, and we got together, and he popped this DVD on that was like this, like it was a DVD of like
a promo of the church.
Promo of the
Yeah.
church, and I'm like sitting here looking at this video.
I was like, she's gonna be so impressed. Like,
and he was so excited, and in my head, I was like,
oh,
I don't want to move to Texas.
that
Like,
meeting did not go the way I had it envisioned
No.
it in my head.
But I remember feeling like I didn't have a choice. I remember
Mm-hmm.
feeling like, well, if this is what Dan is called to, then all of a sudden this is what I'm called to.
Right.
And I think I remember even telling you, if this is what you feel like we should do, I'll do it. And inside I was screaming, I don't want to do this, And so I think that for me was a huge hindrance. I think for a lot of years in our marriage, I lost a big part of myself because I felt like in order to be a good Christian wife, I had to submit and I had to let you lead, that I couldn't lead in the relationship. I could stay home and take care of the kids, but I couldn't actually have a voice and like lead in the relationship. And so
Christine said something so good. She said, I think that concept of submission is, and the way it was taught is why I resisted marriage for a long time.
yeah.
Yeah. If you feel like, wait, so I have to give up all of these parts of me? I have to give up all of this? Like,
Yeah.
what is appealing about that?
Yeah,
You
nothing.
know?
Nothing for the woman anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's a heterosexual marriage, it's like, what does the woman really have to gain from
Right,
that in that scenario?
Yeah. Yeah.
Dino said, I used to think that Kim had to agree with me in order to respect me. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
To feel like any disagreement means lack of respect when that's just simply not true.
And if you think about it in a logical sense, that just sets you up for failure.
Oh, from the
You know what I
beginning.
mean? Because of course you're not going to agree on everything.
Right.
So now it's like my wife doesn't respect me. That like
simply because she has a different opinion.
right. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think John, commented on here. I do think it's not just, he talked about the ability to be confrontational due to familiarity. I don't think it's just familiarity. I also think it's trust.
Yes.
When you trust
Yes.
that I can be my full self and I can say something confrontational, I trust that I'm not going to lose relationship. And I think for you as kind of an Enneagram 9, that fear of losing relationship, when that fear can be put aside,
Right.
then you can be confrontational. I think in relationships that more trust, I think we've been able to communicate more honestly the longer we've been married, because I think there's that compounding trust over time.
Yeah, for sure. And the more that I choose to trust you, and the more that it's been proven that I can be a complete fill in the blank.
No, she's perfect.
And I can know that at the end of the day, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because that has been established, that I can have a really bad day or bad week or bad month or bad year, and now I'm not saying it's okay for me to just like treat you terribly and expect you to just stick around because that's what you're supposed to do. But I think I have learned that, I can push back on this. I can say what I really think and not have to worry that I'm going to have to pay the price for that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing, back on to the subject of, the whole submission thing, I think it's funny how we focus on that so much, but yet in Ephesians 5, which has a lot of, the whole chapter is all about, wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wives, but the whole thing starts with, it says, follow the lead of one another because of your respect for Christ. It's Ephesians 5:21. So follow the lead, submit to one another, follow the lead of one another.
Yeah.
And I think we miss that so often that in any kind of a committed partnership, there should be this idea of mutuality, this idea of mutual submission one to another, where it's constantly us laying down ourselves for the sake of the other person. Now, that doesn't mean shrinking. It doesn't mean not being our full self, but it means, choosing moment by moment. I'm going to choose, trust over being afraid of how you might respond. We have the opportunity to be able to have this mutual submission. So, I'll read this quote by Sarah Bessey, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. But I love this quote. She says, in a marriage of mutuality, there is room for both of us to follow Jesus, for both of us to heed the Spirit, and for both of us to lead, and for both of us to follow. So it's like this idea that, sometimes like I might take the lead on something and sometimes Dan might take the lead, or, it's not this idea of Dan is the leader and he's in charge of our family and I'm supposed to fall in line. Like, it's a partnership, that's what's so beautiful about any kind of committed relationship, is that we are partners. We are not, it's not a hierarchy. Hierarchies never end well. No one, in order for us to, I feel like the beautiful thing about mutuality for me is what you talked about earlier, about we both have the freedom to be our full selves.
Right.
And when that's missing, that's going to break down the relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I can only, like, I love Pastor Andy Stanley, pastors at North Point Church. He talks a lot about this, a lot about mutual submission one to another. And I've thought back how much that would have changed some things early on in our marriage, and changed some of those expectations if we would have saw things as, no, my job is to submit to you and your job is to submit to me. And what a relationship of mutual submission looks like. Man, isn't that what we would all want? Is someone trying to put us first, and you're trying to put me first, and I'm trying to put you first. And Andy Stanley talks about it almost being this race to the back of the line, where you're trying to serve the other person. And
which really, for all relationships at all, is such a beautiful picture of how we can actually really love one another well, is when we're not just in it for what I can get or what I need, but it's all about how can I best serve and love the other person, which is really hard.
Yep.
It's not easy, but...
And when you think about, like, the power dynamics in a relationship where one is to submit to the other and the other is to be over the other, and a lot of power dynamics like that, it leads to and I'm not talking about just physical abuse, but abusing that power.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Resentment, from the one that is having to submit. I mean, how many of us have had bosses that we disagree with, and then the boss comes down and is like, well, it's my way or the highway, here's what we're doing. And yeah, you do it, but you don't like it, and that resentment can grow. How often that happens in marriage. And if we set it up as, hey, one of you needs to take the lead at the expense of the other one, and the other one is just to be subservient, how easy it is to, one, abuse that power, and two, be resentful of that dynamic, when all along Christ is saying, no, listen, submit to each other. That's where it starts. And yes, it does say, wives, submit to your husbands, but it also says, husbands, love your wife as Christ, loved the church, and gave his life for it. You know, like, I don't know what other kind of submission there is but to give one's life for something. So the whole framing of it is mutual submission. And when we get that out of whack, well, you know, there's so many good points. Sam talked about how open communication is the key, and secrets can be dangerous.
Even little, and we're not, and I'm sure Sam would agree with this, but like, we're not even just talking like big, huge secrets,
right.
you know, but like, I think even anytime you're in a relationship and you feel like you can't say what you really think, you know, where you think you have to hide a part of what you think or believe, or, I mean, think about like what that did to you, like when you were kind of going through a deconstruction of your faith and felt like you were afraid to tell me, you know, and what that probably felt like for you to feel like for an extended period of time, I have this thing about myself that I feel like I can't tell you for whatever reason, you know, and that just starts to break down. I just think communication it's huge. It's so important. And so not only like being able to say what you really think, but then being the kind of person, like I know for me, I want to be the kind of person that you can tell me what you really think, and then I don't make you pay for that later.
Right.
You know, where you say, well, you did this and it hurt my feelings. Well, then if I turn around and like get all in a huff about it and like hold that, you know, get real, and then like push you away and withhold affection from you and withhold connection from you because you said something like that, then that tells you, that's not safe for me to be able to say what I really think, you know, and that is something that I know. One thing recently that I caught myself doing was I had done something that hurt you. I had let you down, and it wasn't like a huge thing, but it was important. And I felt legitimately, I felt so bad, but then I like went into this like mode where I was like all mopey and like I felt really guilty and I felt really ashamed that I had let you down. But then you were having to try to comfort me and be like, no, it's really okay, it's really fine. So I messed up. I'm the one that, you know, was selfish or whatever, you know. And then on top of that, because of how I was responding, I then put the onus on you to feel like you had to comfort me and tell when you were the one that got hurt, you know. So I think just I don't want to do that, you know. I want it to be a safe place where we can openly and honestly communicate what's really going on so that we can be our full selves and so we can move forward, you know.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what
Sorry.
I know
what Dino just said.
Yeah.
The price of honesty is sometimes very emotionally expensive. Yes. And yes. And then when that person, you know, and I'm not saying we're always like, if I do something that hurts Dan, of course I'm going to feel bad about that. You know, so I'm not saying we can't ever genuinely grieve those small things and feel sorry and you know, express that to the other person, but when we allow someone's honesty to cost them emotionally, then the next time it's like, well, I just learned that I can't do that. I'm just gonna have to hold that in, and then it just starts a cycle of the breakdown of communication. I
remember when you know, I went through this kind of faith journey where really struggled with some things and really lost some faith and really was wrestling. And I think because of some, I don't think it was anything that you had said or done why I didn't talk to you. I think it was more internal in me.
Right.
But I remember the night when I finally did kind of start letting you in on some things.
God, here we go.
And no, it goes with what you're saying.
I know.
And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I'm using this as an example because I think now we're at this point where, you know, I kind of said, well, man, I'm kind of wrestling with this, and I don't know what I think about this, and I don't know. And I'd made this comment about, like, honestly, I feel like I'm wrestling with everything. Like, everything's on the table. And you're like, what do you mean by everything? And I was like, well, like, everything. And it was in regards to faith. And I was like, I mentioned this, and I mentioned this, and I mentioned a few things.
There's
and
some different theological things that, you know.
And there was one thing that I'd said that you responded, and you're like, well, you're like I don't know I can't remember exactly.
I said, I don't know what that's going to mean for our marriage if you don't believe that anymore.
Yeah. And instantly.
kind of like tongue in cheek a little bit, because it was like one of these big theological points. Again, I was taught my whole life that if you don't agree on everything when it comes to faith, then you're not a good match. Right. So that was my fear was, well, crap. If we differ on these things, can we even still have a good marriage, you know?
And what that communicated to me was I was like kind of towing out and you know, I hadn't talked to hardly anyone
like trying to be
about these things that I'm wrestling with. I'm trying to kind of let you in. And instantly that said, okay, there's that line.
Oh, it's like,
you know what I mean? Like, okay, I can't go there.
Yeah.
But we had the kind of relationship that later, I remember later that evening, I was able to say, babe, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, when I tell you something, say, well, I don't know what that means for our marriage, because instantly that puts me in a place like, well, clearly I can't talk about this, you know? And instantly you're like, no, you're right. And, you know, of course, I was being tongue-in-cheek. I didn't really, you know, and all those things. I mean, but it opened up, and I was so grateful that we had the relationship that I could even push a little bit more and go, hey, we can't, like, this has to be a safe place where we can, like, talk about whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And again, I think that goes back to a lot of things that I was taught about what a healthy, like, if for lack of better words, a Christian marriage, you know, when two people are following Jesus within this partnership, there were so many things that I was taught of what that had to look like in order to be acceptable. And so it was like that. I think those expectations that I carried into our marriage have probably been the biggest source of contention over the past 18 years, because it wasn't even so much, it was like this idea of what I had always been told that a marriage between two people who are following Jesus was supposed to look like. There was there was no deviance from that. I was never given another option. And so it was real damaging, you know, in a lot of ways. It was real damaging to me personally and to our relationship. And I think breaking free from those expectations and understanding that, you know, I, as someone who's following Jesus, like, each of us are doing our very best to follow the Spirit and to love God and to love people. And, like, in the middle of that, you know, there are going to be times when we're going to think about things differently, and that's okay, you know, and kind of letting go of that expectation that in order to be, like, people like to throw out that unequally yoked verse a lot. Like, I was always taught that means you cannot date or marry someone whose faith differs from you in any way. Like, you have to be in perfect alignment and agreement on every theological point in the history of theology, in order for your marriage to be healthy. And I've realized that's actually really not true, that we can have big differences when it comes to our faith, and that doesn't mean that we can't still have a very healthy, strong relationship where we're each doing our best to follow the Spirit.
And it really is so much of those expectations that you carry in, whether you realize it or not, are going to impact your relationship. And that's, for me, one reason. I was talking to a couple from Icon this week, and they asked about premarital counseling, and I was like, yes, like, I can't recommend counseling and therapy enough. And I think
with someone who is licensed to do that,
knows what they're doing. Yes, absolutely. This isn't like calling your best friend,
or even I'm like, we aren't counselors, so we can give you advice and we can, like, walk along with you, but, like, I'm not doing marriage counseling.
It's a couple that I'm, like, doing their wedding, and they're like, do you do marriage counseling? I was like, listen, I love you, I love the church, I am not a counselor. Like, I just...
Here's Dino's number.
Yes, and that's exactly what I did. So, Dino, they'll be calling you. So, so I think that's so healthy to, you know, to be able to work through some of that stuff. You know, Dino said, he's talked about his wife and kids would often hold back their true feelings because they were afraid of his reaction. And that kind of ties into what I think Pat said earlier, when that mutual submission gets out of balance, where it's like, you need to submit to me, then that's no longer mutual. You know, that's not mutual submission. That's you submitting to me. And that when there's that fear of reaction, I think that's where counseling can be healthy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because then
really
a counselor
helpful.
can kind of step in and go, okay, no, calm down. We need to listen to this, and how does that make you feel, and really be able to kind of process some of those things.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, how time?
We're actually kind of running tight on time. It's been a good conversation.
It has been.
Is there anything you want to kind of close with?
Yeah, I'll kind of close it out with just one other thing that I think, as far as most helpful things for me that I have found in this committed partnership that we have, is, so the first one was the mutuality, you know, the following the lead of one another. And then the second thing that I think has been really helpful is just learning to choose that person over and over again. You know, like if you want to be in a marriage, you know, and in this committed relationship for the long haul, I think that one of the most important things we need to do is to continue to choose each other over and over. You know, there's another Sarah Bessey quote. She wrote a blog post about marriage, and that's where I got these quotes from. But it says, we can choose in each moment love over fear, abundance over scarcity, vulnerability over false armor, mercy over judgment, mutuality over dominance. We can choose to lay down and surrender our power out of hard-won trust, and we can serve one another instead of our own self. And that, I just thought that was so beautiful, and it reminded me of Ephesians 4:32 that says, be kind and tender to one another, forgive one another just as God forgave you because of what Christ has done. So just this idea of continuing to choose the other person on a daily basis, I think is one of the most helpful things I've learned about having a partnership that's kind of for the long haul.
Yeah.
You know, like and there are days when I choose myself, you know, and there are days when I'm selfish and,
course,
you know, and Dan's like, yeah, and I'm.
No, stupid. No, don't. No. They're absolutely, yes. But the choice is, even in spite of that, continuing to choose, you know, and I think that's one thing that culture has kind of gotten wrong, that love is this emotional feeling, and we watch these romantic comedies, and it's like, we think that, like, you know, relationships are, you know, these, like, you always have these emotions, you always have these feelings. So much of it is a choice, you know, and I'm not saying you continue to choose when someone's being abusive and hurtful. No, you keep choosing. That's not at all what we're saying. So I want to be clear on that. But when you're imperfect and when I'm imperfect, love is choosing that person in spite of that. Because, man, I want someone to choose me, you know, when I'm not at my best. Because I know there's gonna be a lot of days like that. So that being a good picture of what love is.
Well, and I think one thing that I have to remember too is, like, in our marriage and with our family, it's like, it's not just about choosing a relationship or choosing the marriage. It's like, we're building a life together. So it's like choosing that life together over, you know, just in that moment, whatever it is that I think I want or need, you know. I think it's this idea of, I want to keep choosing our life together, you know, and that requires, I think, of me, of each of us, of each person in that relationship, it just requires that choice every single day of, you know, I'm going to put our life together as what matters the most. You know, not the selfish things that I think I want in any given moment, you know, but it's the ultimate choices, you know, to continue building this life together. So. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been so cool to, again, have you guys there in the chat and just kind of have a conversation. It's so infrequent that you can kind of get this in church, where we can kind of interact with you guys, and I've been absolutely loving this. Me too. I really have been too. And we're not like, you know, we are not the end all be all. Everything we say is not like, this is just us.
I'm grateful for the comments, because that makes the content better.
Yeah.
Like, we've got about this much. When we add what you guys have, it ends up being all right.
Seriously.
So, but hey, we do have a couple announcements before we wrap up. Some things we want to let you know about. One, important, and this is starting next week.
Yes.
cool. This is starting next week.
And if we're wrong, somebody on staff correct us.
Yes,
if we're wrong. But
I think we're right.
I think we're right.
We are going to, one thing that we've loved so much is having this interaction. And the thing about this interaction, okay, Amanda says it is next week. If Amanda says it, it's definitely right.
She runs the world.
That's right. So, but this interaction is like cut in half because like after we're going to have a kid's service and then we're going to have another service and we're going to have this kind of interaction, but it's all online. So it's pretty easy to access. So we're actually going to transition to one service starting next Sunday. It's going to be at 9 o'clock. It's going to be at 9:30. We're still going to do the lobby, but the lobby is going to move an hour later. So lobby is going to be at 9 o'clock on Zoom, and then we're going to start service at 9:30. Then there'll also be a kids service at 10:30. So we're going to do this one to allow there to be more interaction, to kind of gather everyone kind of in the same digital space, if you will. And as always, it'll still be available on YouTube and on our website and podcast and all those things. But one, we're going to do that to create more interaction. Another reason why we're going to do that, quite honestly, is to make production a little bit easier, to make kind of doing all of this a little bit easier. But then also, Kelly and I, not next Sunday, but the following Sunday, are going to take a little bit of a break. We, this past year and a half, if you haven't kind of been with Icon on this journey, it's been a tiresome year and a half.
For a lot of different reasons.
Yes, and for a lot of people. But I think the two of us kind of having to steer the ship through this past year and a half has just been honestly exhausting. I know I've talked to people who've said they've seen it on me on Sunday mornings, and I'm like, thank you, you jerk.
Like, did you look tired?
Yeah, they're like, man, are you okay? And you're like, thank you.
You're like, no, I'm not.
But no, we need a break, and the board has been so generous in allowing us to take a little bit of a sabbatical. So we'll be here next Sunday, but the week after that, we're going to be starting a 7-week sabbatical just to kind of rest and recharge and get our feet back underneath us.
And it's because we've taken some time off here and there, but since the church started 8 years ago, we haven't ever done an extended break like this before. And I think just for our own emotional health, for our relational health, for the health of our family, and we all know, gosh, the whole COVID-19, this whole church era has I think it's been really difficult for a lot of church leaders and a lot of pastors. And so I think that, it's time that we get some time to focus on ourselves and make sure that we are at our best. Yeah,
because we want to offer you guys our best. And quite honestly, I can speak for myself. I'm not at my best.
Me neither.
And I talked a little bit about it a few weeks ago. It's been a challenge for me, and I think there's some things that I do. Talked about the importance of counseling. I'm getting some counseling.
Same.
I'm leaning into this time to make sure it's not just a break. It's not just a vacation. In ministry, this idea of sabbatical is important because it's unfortunately the ministry and life can kind of chew you up a little bit. So we're looking forward to this. We've got an incredible team that's going to take things. You guys won't miss a beat.
They were just like, we got this. You do what you got to do. We got this.
So there, you're going to see some of them speaking. We're going to have some guest speakers. It's not going to miss a beat. So we're so grateful for that team. We're grateful for the boards. So we're looking forward to this season. Two other things we want to let you know about. One, next Sunday, we are going to be doing communion. So if you live in the area and would like to take the same communion as everyone else, we're going to do kind of a drive-through at the church on Saturday, July 11th from noon to 2. We'll be there to pass out the little really bad communion.
We'll have them set up on a table outside in the breezeway of the church, so you can just
properly social distance.
Yes, you can hop out, grab what you need.
And you can feel free to take whatever you have on hand. It can be coffee and some toast. It can be whatever.
I'm sorry, Tanner. I don't know if he has So our friend Tanner is living in Japan right now, and he made a comment, and it's in Japanese. So I don't know if it's because you have either you know what you're saying,
and we're gonna all have to translate. Adam agrees though, so that's good. Oh, buddy, Tanner, so good to see you, man. Well, hey, we the other thing I want to let you know about is we do have a kids service at 10:30, and we'll go ahead and let them. I thought it was at 10:15. Amanda's gonna once again tell us what's
Amanda,
right
because she knows.
Yeah, she'll let us know when that is. Sorry, thank you.
It's at 10:15.
It is at 10:15. So
okay,
this slide is a
that
week.
That might be for next
That's
week.
for the
that
future
slide
weeks.
is for next week.
You're welcome, Amanda.
See once again, we are on it.
Yep.
We are on
Without our team, we're in trouble. So 10:15. So starting in just 7-8 minutes, there's going to be a kid service. So if you got kiddos, gather them around for that. They'll love that. Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Kel, for kind of leading this conversation.
Well,
so
I know.
I'm just trying to mutually submit to you. That's all. So
that's your
teach me your ways.
You're such a good mutual submitter.
Isn't my wife so hot? So anyway, we need to shut this down. So it's been so good being with you guys. We love you, and we'll see you back next week. Take care.
Bye.